The grand chamber of the Galactic Assembly stretched so far that the ceiling disappeared into artificial clouds. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the human podium, a tiny figure in a sea of alien delegates. Around her, beings from 100 worlds watched with expressions ranging from boredom to contempt. She gripped the edge of her podium and began to speak. "Honorable delegates of the Concordat of Seven, representatives of the galaxy," Sarah said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Humanity comes before this assembly today to request what we believe is a basic right, the right to defend ourselves." A rippling sound moved through the chamber. It took Sarah a moment to realize it was laughter. The Vakthir delegate rose from his seat. He was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, with scales that gleamed like polished obsidian. His species had ruled a quarter of the galaxy for 6,000 years. He looked at Sarah the way a teacher might look at a confused child. "Ambassador Chen," he said, his voice like grinding stones. "Your species joined the galactic community 200 years ago. In that time, you have proven useful. Your engineers build adequate stations. Your miners extract resources efficiently. Your traders are honest, if unremarkable." He paused, and his mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile. "But defense? Military power? These are not toys for children." Sarah felt her jaw tighten. "With respect, delegate, we are not children. We are a sovereign species requesting the same rights as—" "The same rights?" The Vakthir delegate's laugh boomed across the chamber. "Ambassador, my species has survived 10,000 years of galactic warfare. The Concordat of Seven has maintained peace for 3 millennia. We have earned our position through blood and fire. When humanity has existed for even a fraction of that time, when you have proven you can survive real threats, then perhaps we will discuss military rights." Other delegates nodded. A few made sounds of agreement. Sarah pressed forward. "We have proven ourselves peaceful neighbors. We follow galactic law. We pay our taxes and trade tariffs. All we ask is the right to build defensive fleets to protect our colonies from—" "From what?" Another delegate interrupted, this one from the insectoid Zith Collective. "The Concordat protects all member species. You do not need weapons. You need only comply with our regulations." "Those regulations," Sarah said carefully, "prohibit us from developing any quantum disruption technology. They limit our ships to basic thrusters. They prevent us from manufacturing anything larger than a patrol vessel. Meanwhile, our colonies on the frontier have been attacked 17 times in the last decade by pirates and raiders." 17 attacks, the Vakthir said dismissively. "And how many deaths?" Sarah's hands clenched. 3,412 human lives. "A tragedy, certainly," the Vakthir said, his tone suggesting it was anything but. "However, in galactic terms, this is barely noticeable. The Concordat loses more citizens to traffic accidents than your species has lost to violence." "Those were our people," Sarah said, her voice rising despite her attempts to stay calm. "Parents, children, they died because they couldn't defend themselves because your protection patrols arrive hours or days after attacks occur." Then perhaps, a new voice interjected, cold and sharp, "humanity should reconsider living on dangerous, frontier worlds." The speaker was a Quellan, a species known for their diplomatic cruelty. The Quellan delegate's 3 eyes fixed on Sarah with something like amusement. "Withdraw your petition, Ambassador Chen," the Quellan continued. "The Concordat will not grant military rights to a species as young and volatile as humanity. You lack the wisdom, the experience, and frankly the necessity. Accept our protection or accept the consequences of your choices." Sarah looked around the chamber. She saw indifference on most faces. A few aliens weren't even paying attention, their focus on personal screens or private conversations. To them, humanity was a minor species making minor complaints. "I see," Sarah said quietly. "Then humanity respectfully requests that this assembly at least reduce our trade tariffs and colonial taxes, given that we apparently receive inadequate protection for what we pay." The Vakthir delegate actually laughed at that. "Your taxes fund the fleet that keeps the galaxy safe, Ambassador. They fund these very halls. You will continue to pay your share like every other species." The vote was called. The petition was denied with barely any discussion. As Sarah left the chamber, she heard more laughter behind her. She walked through the gleaming corridors of the assembly station, past windows that showed the beautiful blue-green planet below. This was Concordat Prime, the capital of galactic civilization. Everything here was old, established, certain. The aliens who lived here had forgotten what it meant to struggle. They had forgotten what it meant to be afraid. Sarah reached her quarters and immediately opened a secure channel. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a gray-haired woman in a military uniform. "Admiral Torres," Sarah said. "They denied us. They laughed at us." Admiral Torres nodded slowly. She had expected this. "Then we proceed with contingency. Plan Prometheus. How long before they send an enforcement action?" "Based on their standard protocols? 2 weeks, maybe 3. They'll want to make an example. That gives us time," Torres said. "Barely." The channel closed. Sarah sat down and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the beautiful facade of the Concordat's peace, something terrible was being prepared. But it wasn't being prepared by humanity. 3 days later, the Concordat enforcement fleet arrived at mining colony Epsilon 7. The colony was home to 847 humans and their families. They mined rare elements from the asteroid belt and sent them back to Earth. It was hard work, but honest work. They bothered no one. The fleet commander, a Vakthir warrior named Dresh, reviewed his orders one final time. Intelligence suggested the colony was manufacturing weapons. Specifically, they had built basic railguns for defending against pirate raids. Under Concordat law, this was illegal for non-Concordat species. The punishment was specified in the regulations: complete destruction as a deterrent to other species. Dresh felt no particular malice toward the humans. This was simply how the galaxy worked. Rules existed. Rules were enforced. Without strict enforcement, chaos returned. And chaos meant war. He opened a communication channel to the colony. "Human, Settlement Epsilon 7. This is Concordat Enforcement Fleet 779. You are in violation of Concordat military regulations. Power down all facilities and prepare for inspection." On the colony, Administrator James Park read the message, with growing dread. He'd been expecting something like this, but not so soon. He opened a channel back to the fleet. "Concordat Fleet, this is Administrator Park. We have no military installations here. We have basic defensive weapons to protect against pirates. Surely this doesn't violate—" "You possess weapons," Dresh interrupted. "This is violation enough. You have 1 hour to evacuate." James felt his blood run cold. "Evacuate? We have 800 people here, including children. We don't have enough transport ships to—" "1 hour," Dresh repeated and closed the channel. The colony erupted in chaos. People ran to the docking bays, fighting for spaces on the few transport ships available. James organized the evacuation as best he could, prioritizing children and families. But he knew the math. He'd known it the moment the fleet arrived. They couldn't save everyone. 53 minutes later, the last transport ship undocked with 416 people aboard. 431 people remained in the colony, including James Park. He stood at the command center window and watched the Concordat ships position themselves around the asteroid. His communication panel beeped. He answered it. "Administrator, Park, all ships have cleared the safety zone. Begin final evacuation immediately," said a voice he didn't recognize. It was the Concordat fleet, giving him one last chance. "There are no more ships," James said quietly. "We're still here, 431 of us." There was a long silence. "Then you should not have built weapons," Dresh said. The first plasma lance struck the colony's central dome. The atmosphere explosively decompressed, and James had exactly 3 seconds to think about his wife on Earth, his daughter who had just graduated from academy, his son who wanted to be a pilot. Then the second lance hit, and he thought nothing at all. The Concordat fleet methodically destroyed every structure, every ship, every piece of equipment. When they finished, Epsilon 7 was nothing but cooling metal and frozen bodies tumbling through space. Dresch filed his report. Colony destroyed. Weapons cache eliminated. Recommend increased monitoring of all human settlements. The report was approved without comment. Just another day's work enforcing galactic law. When news reached Earth 3 days later, the planet went silent with grief. Then rage. Protests filled every major city. People demanded action, demanded justice, demanded war. The government tried to calm things. We cannot fight the Concordat, they said. They have millions of ships. They have technology we barely understand. Fighting them would be suicide. But in a secret facility near Neptune, far from Earth's sun, something else was happening. Dr. Marcus Webb stood before a massive window looking into a construction bay. Behind him, a dozen scientists worked at holographic displays, monitoring systems that would seem like magic to most humans. Before him, suspended in the vacuum of space, was something that wasn't quite there. The Prometheus. It was difficult to look at directly. The ship existed, but it also didn't. It was 12 kilometers long, bristling with weapons and systems, but when Webb tried to focus on it, his eyes slid away. Scanners showed it in 1,000 different positions simultaneously. The ship existed in quantum superposition, locked in all possible states at once. How long? Admiral Torres asked behind him. She had arrived that morning on a military transport, her face grim. They destroyed Epsilon 7, Webb said without turning around. It wasn't a question. 431 dead, men, women, children. The Concordat called it an enforcement action. Webb closed his eyes. Then we're out of time, aren't we? We received an ultimatum 2 hours ago, Torres said. Surrender all weapons development, all defensive systems, everything. Submit to full Concordat military oversight, or face corrective action. Corrective action, Webb repeated bitterly. They mean invasion. They mean occupation. They've given us 72 hours to comply. Webb turned to face her. He was an old man, his face lined with 60 years of life, 40 of which he'd spent studying quantum mechanics. He'd won 3 Nobel Prizes. He'd taught at the finest universities. And for the last 15 years, he'd worked in secret on this impossible project. The Prometheus isn't ready, he said. We've run simulations, yes, we've tested the quantum lock on small probes, but we've never activated it at full scale. We don't know if the crew can actually control it. We don't know if the weapons will work. We don't know if turning it on might rip a hole in space-time. Torres nodded. I know. But Marcus, they're coming. In 72 hours, a Concordat fleet will arrive at Earth. They'll disable our orbital stations. They'll land troops in every major city. They'll dismantle our government and install their own. And we'll become a subject species for the next 1,000 years. Webb looked back at the ship that wasn't quite there. Or we turn this on, and we find out if 50 years of theory actually works. Can we win? Torres asked. Against the Concordat? Webb laughed, a sound without humor. Admiral, this ship exists in quantum superposition. It's everywhere and nowhere until someone observes it. Our weapons fire from positions that shouldn't exist. Our defenses work by simply not being where the enemy aims. In theory, we could fight the entire Concordat fleet with this one ship. In theory. In theory, Webb agreed. But theory and reality have an unfortunate habit of diverging at the worst possible moments. Torres was quiet for a moment. What do you need? A crew, Webb said, and I know exactly who should command it. Far from Neptune, on a small military base near Mars, Captain Elena Vasquez received an encrypted message marked with the highest security clearance. She read it 3 times, certain she was misunderstanding. But no, the message was clear. Report to Neptune immediately. Prepare to take command of humanity's last hope. She looked out her window at the red planet below. Somewhere out there, beyond Mars, beyond Jupiter, beyond everything she knew, aliens were preparing to crush her species like insects. And somehow, she was supposed to stop them. Elena Vasquez had fought in the border skirmishes against pirates, She'd commanded frigates and destroyers. She'd been decorated for bravery, but she'd never imagined commanding a ship that barely existed, fighting enemies who'd ruled the galaxy since before her ancestors learned to make fire. She closed the message and began to pack. The clock was ticking. In 72 hours, everything would change. The galaxy didn't know it yet, but it was about to learn a very hard lesson. Never underestimate humanity. Never assume the small and young are weak, and never ever mistake patience for acceptance. The Prometheus waited in the dark, neither real nor unreal, ready to teach the galaxy what humans did when their backs were against the wall. Captain Elena Vasquez arrived at Neptune Station 48 hours after receiving her orders. The military transport docked with barely a whisper, its systems running dark to avoid detection. She floated through the zero-gravity corridors, pulling herself along handrails toward the command center. Neptune Station wasn't like other military facilities. There were no windows showing the ice giant planet below, no observation decks for personnel to relax and watch the stars. Everything was buried deep inside the station's core, hidden behind layers of radiation shielding and quantum-dampening fields. This was a place built for secrets. Admiral Torres met her at the command center entrance. The older woman looked tired, like she hadn't slept in days. She probably hadn't. "Captain Vasquez," Torres said, offering her hand. "Thank you for coming so quickly." "Admiral," Elena replied, shaking hands firmly. "Your message said this was urgent. Something about humanity's last hope?" Torres smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Come with me. I need to show you something impossible." They took a transport tube deep into the station, past security checkpoints Elena didn't even know existed. At each one, guards in unmarked uniforms checked their identifications and scanned their biometrics. Finally, they reached a massive airlock door marked with warnings in 12 languages. "Before we go in," Torres said, "I need to prepare you. What you're about to see will be difficult to understand, difficult to look at. Your brain will tell you something is wrong, that what you're seeing can't exist. Trust me when I say it does. Exist. Just not in the way you think existence works." Elena had faced down pirate raiders without flinching. She'd made split-second decisions that saved her crew and killed her enemies. But something in Torres's voice made her nervous. "I'm ready," she said. The airlock opened. The observation deck beyond was huge, with a transparent aluminum window stretching 30 meters across. Beyond that window, in the vacuum of space, was the Prometheus. Elena looked at it and immediately felt dizzy. The ship was there, she could see it, but her eyes kept sliding off it. When she tried to focus on the bow, she saw the stern. When she looked at the weapons arrays, they appeared in 6 different places at once. The ship was 12 kilometers long, but also seemed to be the size of a small moon. It was dark gray, but also burning white. It existed, but also didn't. "What am I looking at?" Elena whispered. Dr. Marcus Webb approached from the side. She hadn't noticed him before, but now he was there. An old man with kind eyes and a scientist's distracted manner. "You're looking at a ship in permanent quantum superposition," Webb explained. "The Prometheus exists in all possible states simultaneously. It's here, but it's also there and in a million other positions at once. Until someone observes it, until someone forces reality to choose, it's everywhere and nowhere." Elena pressed her hand against the window. "That's impossible." "It should be," Webb agreed. "The math said it might work. The theory said maybe, but we didn't know for sure until we built it. And now here it is, breaking every law of physics we thought we understood." "How do you control something that isn't in one place?" Elena asked. Webb smiled. "That's the interesting part. We can't. At least most beings can't. The concordate species, the aliens who run the galaxy, they perceive reality differently than we do. Their consciousness evolved in stable environments. They see things as they are, fixed and certain. And humans?" Elena prompted. "Humans evolved in chaos," Webb said. "We survived ice ages and predators and diseases in each other. Our brains learned to see possibilities, to imagine futures that don't exist yet. We're natural quantum observers. When a human looks at the Prometheus and thinks, "Be here," the ship collapses into that position. When we think, "Fire from there," the weapons appear in that location and shoot. Elena stared at the ship. "You're saying we control it with our minds?" "With your consciousness," Webb corrected. "It's more than just thinking. It's observing, choosing which reality becomes real." The ship's neural interface links directly to human brain patterns. We tested it with volunteers. The concordate species couldn't even make the ship respond. But humans, we can fly it like it's an extension of our own bodies. Admiral Torres stepped forward. "Which is why you're here, Captain. We need someone who can command this ship. Someone who understands combat, who can make decisions under pressure, who can observe all those quantum possibilities and choose the right one in the middle of a battle." "You want me to command that?" Elena said, pointing at the ship that was and wasn't there. "Yes," Torres said simply. "When?" Torres checked her wrist display. "The Concordat has given us 72 hours to surrender all our weapons and submit to occupation. That deadline expires in 47 hours. We expect their fleet to arrive shortly after. So you have about 40 hours to learn how to fly an impossible ship and save humanity." Elena looked at the Prometheus again. This time, when she focused on it, she thought she saw it more clearly, or maybe the ship was adjusting to her observation. It was impossible to tell. "No pressure, then," she said. Dr. Webb laughed. "Actually, Captain, there's a lot of pressure. If we turn this ship on at full power, and you can't control it, the quantum flux could destabilize. Best case scenario, the ship explodes. Worst case, we create a quantum singularity that swallows the solar system." "You're joking." "I'm really not," Webb said. "But we've run the numbers. We think the probability of complete disaster is only around 8%. 8%, Elena repeated. "You want me to take an 8% chance of destroying our entire solar system versus a 100% chance of humanity becoming slaves to the Concordat for the next 1,000 years, Torres said. "Yes, we want you to take that chance." Elena was quiet for a long time. Then she nodded. "When do we start?" The next 36 hours were the strangest of Elena's life. She sat in a chair, surrounded by holographic displays while Webb's team attached neural sensors to her head. The sensors would link her consciousness directly to the Prometheus's quantum core. "Think of it like learning to use a new limb," Webb explained. "At first, it will feel foreign, strange, but your brain will adapt. Humans are very good at adapting." They started with simple exercises. Elena would think about the ship being in a specific position, and sensors would record whether the quantum state collapsed that way. At first, nothing happened. The ship remained in its superposition, stubbornly refusing to choose. Then 6 hours in, something clicked. Elena thought about the Prometheus being directly ahead of the observation deck, and suddenly it was. Not a gradual movement. The ship was simply there, like it had always been there. When she stopped focusing, it slipped back into superposition, existing everywhere again. "Good," Webb said excitedly. "You're starting to get it. Now try moving it left." For the next day and a half, Elena practiced moving the ship, firing its weapons at test targets, bringing its shields online in specific configurations. Each time it got easier. Her brain started to understand the quantum nature of her new command. She stopped thinking of the Prometheus as a single ship and started seeing it as a probability, cloud of ships all waiting for her to choose which one became real. The crew was already selected. 200 men and women, all volunteers, all briefed on the mission. They came aboard the Prometheus through quantum-locked airlocks, each person adding their consciousness to the ship's neural network. The more human minds connected to it, the more stable the quantum state became. Lieutenant Commander James Park, no relation to the administrator who died at Epsilon 7, served as Elena's first officer. He was younger than her, barely 30, but he'd scored higher on the quantum perception tests than anyone except Elena herself. "Ship status?" Elena asked as she settled into the command chair for the first time. The command deck was unlike anything she'd seen before. The walls were transparent, showing space in all directions but also showing tactical displays and quantum probability maps. When she focused on any display, it became more solid, more real. All systems are online, James reported. Quantum core is stable at 97%. Weapons batteries are charged. Shield generators are in superposition mode. Crew complement is full. We're as ready as we're going to be. Neural interface? Elena asked. Functioning perfectly. Webb's voice came through the comm system. He was monitoring from Neptune Station. Your brainwaves are syncing with the ship's quantum field. I'm seeing coherence patterns I didn't think were possible. Captain, I think you might be the most naturally gifted quantum observer we've ever tested. Elena wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a burden. How much time until the Concordate fleet arrives? 11 hours, Admiral Torres replied, her face appearing on one of the displays. Long-range sensors detected them entering the solar system 20 minutes ago. 300 ships led by the Vakthir battlecruiser Endless Judgment. It's their most powerful warship. This fleet could sterilize Earth and barely use half its firepower. 300 ships. Elena had commanded a destroyer in the border, skirmishes, facing down 3 or 4 pirate raiders at once. 300 ships was beyond anything in human military experience. Orders, Admiral? Elena asked. They'll head for Earth first, expecting our military command to surrender. You'll intercept them near Saturn. Try to scare them off if possible. But Captain? Torres's face was grim. If they won't leave, you are authorized to use any force necessary. Humanity will not become a slave species. We either stay free or we die free. Understood, Admiral, Elena said. The hours crawled by. The crew ran drills, practiced quantum maneuvers, tested weapon systems. Elena spent the time meditating, focusing her consciousness, preparing for what was coming. She could feel the Prometheus around her, feel its potential waiting to be unleashed. A spy probe appeared near Neptune. It was a small thing, barely larger than a basketball, but it was equipped with powerful sensors. It scanned the shipyard, detected the massive quantum signature of the Prometheus, and immediately sent a burst transmission toward the approaching Concordat fleet. They know we're here, James said. Elena nodded. Good. Let them know. Let them see what they're walking into. On the Endless Judgment, Admiral Kritesh read the probe's report with mild interest. A large quantum signature near Neptune. The humans had apparently built something, probably a half-finished station or an experimental reactor. Nothing that could threaten a Concordat fleet. Change course, he ordered. We'll investigate Neptune before proceeding to Earth. If the humans have illegal quantum technology, we'll destroy it along with the facility. His tactical officer, a younger Vakthir named Resh, looked uncertain. Admiral, the quantum readings are unusual. I've never seen a signature quite like this. Probably unstable, Kritesh said dismissively. Human technology is crude. They likely don't even realize how dangerous their experiment is. We'll be doing them a favor by destroying it before it explodes. The fleet changed course, 300 ships moving in perfect formation. They were confident, certain, unworried. They had done this 1,000 times before to 100 different species. Show up with overwhelming force, deliver an ultimatum, watch the primitives surrender. It had never failed. 12 hours later, the Concordat fleet emerged from quantum jump near Neptune. Their sensors immediately lit up with warnings. The quantum signature was massive, far larger than any reactor or station should produce, and it was moving. What is that? Refresh demanded, staring at his tactical display. The Prometheus appeared, on their scanners in 1,000 different positions at once. It was ahead of them, behind them, above them, below them. Their targeting computers couldn't lock on because the target wouldn't stop being in multiple places simultaneously. Admiral Kritesh felt the first stirring of unease. Hail them, he ordered. Elena received the transmission on the command deck. She could see the Concordat fleet now, 300 ships in a massive formation, bristling with weapons. They were beautiful in a terrible way, each one a work of art designed for destruction. Unknown vessel, Kratesh's voice came through, deep and authoritative. This is Admiral Kratesh of the Concordat Enforcement Fleet. You are operating illegal quantum technology in violation of galactic law. Power down your systems immediately and prepare to be boarded. Elena took a deep breath. This was it. The moment everything changed. Concordat Fleet, she replied, her voice calm and clear. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the human battleship Prometheus. You have entered the Sol system with hostile intent. You have murdered our civilians. You have threatened our homeworld. I am giving you one chance. Turn around and leave, now. There was a moment of shocked silence, then Kratesh laughed. Captain Vasquez, he said, and she could hear the condescension in his voice. You command one ship. I command 300. You possess illegal technology. I possess the authority of the Concordat. Surrender your ship or be destroyed with it. You have 1 minute to comply. Elena looked at James. He nodded, ready. She looked at her crew. They were afraid, but determined. Then she looked at the tactical display, at the 300 ships that thought they had already won. Concordat, Fleet, Elena said quietly. You've killed your last human. Leave now, or learn what happens when you push humanity too far. Kratesh's response was immediate. All ships open fire. Destroy that vessel. 300 ships fired at once. Plasma lances, fusion torpedoes, particle beams, and quantum disruption pulses. Enough firepower to vaporize a planet. All of it converging on the Prometheus's last known position. All of it hitting empty space. Elena had already observed the ship into a different position, 300 kilometers away from where the Concordat expected them to be. Return fire, she said calmly. All weapons, full spread. Show them what quantum-locked weapons can do. The Prometheus fired back, and the battle that would change the galaxy forever began. The first volley from the Prometheus was something the Concordat had never seen before. The weapons didn't fire from where the ship appeared to be. They fired from where the ship could be, from all the positions it existed in simultaneously across quantum space. 50 Concordat ships exploded at once. Not damaged, not disabled, exploded. The quantum torpedoes appeared inside their shields, materialized directly adjacent to their reactor cores, and detonated before the ships even knew they were under attack. One moment the vessels were there, proud warships, of species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. The next moment they were expanding clouds of superheated debris. Admiral Kratesh stared at his tactical display in disbelief. 50 ships gone. In an instant, his shields hadn't even registered the attack. What just happened? He demanded. Refresh frantically worked his console, trying to understand what his sensors were telling him. Admiral, the weapons, they didn't come from the ship's position. They came from... I don't know how to explain this. They came from positions the ship isn't in. Our shields were facing the wrong direction, because the attack originated from inside the defensive perimeter. That's impossible, Kratesh said. Yes, Admiral, Refresh agreed. It should be impossible, but 50 of our ships are gone. Another officer called out from across the bridge. Admiral, the enemy vessel is targeting us again. Kratesh made a decision born from 6,000 years of military doctrine. All ships focus fire on that vessel, concentrate all weapons on its current position, overwhelm its defenses with sheer firepower. It was the right tactical decision against any normal enemy. Against the Prometheus, it was suicide. 250 ships turned their weapons on the quantum signature they could detect. Every ship in the fleet fired at once, holding nothing back. The volume of fire was so intense that it created a brief artificial sun in the darkness of space. On the Prometheus's command deck, Elena watched the incoming fire with calm focus. She could see it all. Every shot, every torpedo, every beam weapon. More importantly, she could see where they were aimed. She closed her eyes and thought about the ship being somewhere else. The Prometheus simply wasn't there when the weapons arrived. It had collapsed into a different quantum state, appearing 300 kilometers away in a direction the Concordat hadn't even thought to cover. They're learning to predict our movements, Captain, James reported. Next volley will Have a wider spread. Then we don't give them a next volley, Elena said. Fire quantum lances. Target their command ships first. The Prometheus's main weapons were unlike anything humanity had built before. They were coherent beams of quantum-locked particles that existed in superposition until the moment they struck their target. This meant they could be fired around obstacles through shields that weren't facing the right direction, from angles that geometry said shouldn't exist. 20 more Concordate ships died. These were cruisers and destroyers, the squadron, commanders, and tactical coordinators. Without them, the fleet's coordinated firing pattern fell apart into chaos. They're trying to retreat, James called out. Elena checked her tactical display. He was right. About 80 ships at the fleet's edge were powering up their quantum jump drives, preparing to flee the battle. Predict their jump coordinates, Elena ordered. Deploy quantum mines at their destination points. The Prometheus's quantum core calculated probable escape routes. The ship deployed small quantum-locked mines, devices that existed in superposition until a ship emerged from jump space nearby. Then they would collapse into real space directly in the ship's path. 70 ships successfully jumped away from the battle. 60 of them emerged right into the minefields. The explosions were beautiful and terrible, brief flowers of fusion fire blooming in the darkness. 10 ships escaped. 10 out of 300. On the Endless Judgment, Admiral Kratesh finally understood what he was facing. This wasn't a battle. This was an execution. His fleet, the fleet that had pacified a dozen species, the fleet that represented 3,000 years of concordant military supremacy, was being destroyed by a single human ship. Tactical, he said, his voice tight. What are our losses? Refreshes. Hands shook as he read the numbers. 220 ships destroyed, Admiral. 70 jumped away. Most were destroyed by mines. Current fleet strength. 12 ships including the Endless Judgment. 12 ships. From 300. The battle had lasted 17 minutes. How is this possible? Kratesh whispered. Admiral, we need to retreat, Refresh urged. If we stay, we die. That ship can predict our movements, fire from impossible angles, and be anywhere it wants to be. We can't fight it. Kratesh wanted to argue, wanted to find some tactical solution, some way to turn this around. But he'd been a warrior for 400 years. He knew when a battle was lost. All remaining ships, he said, the words tasting like poison. Emergency jump scatter pattern. Rendezvous at waypoint Gamma 7. The 12 surviving ships jumped away in different directions, making themselves harder to target. The Prometheus could have pursued them, could have hunted down each one. But Elena let them go. Hold fire, she ordered. Let them run. Let them tell the Concordate what happened here. James looked at her questioningly. Captain, we could destroy them all. Yes, Elena agreed, but we don't need to. We need survivors. We need witnesses to carry the message back to the Concordate. We need the galaxy to know what happens when you threaten humanity. She stood up from her command chair and looked around at her crew. They were shaking, some crying, all clearly affected by what they'd just done. They'd killed thousands of beings in less than 20 minutes, not because they wanted to, but because they had to. We didn't start this, Elena said to them. We tried peace. We tried diplomacy. We asked for the basic right to defend ourselves, and they laughed at us. They destroyed Epsilon 7. They killed 400 of our people as a lesson. They came here to make us slaves. She paused. Well, they've learned a different lesson now. Humanity will not be conquered. Not today. Not ever. The crew nodded, standing a little straighter. They'd carried an impossible burden and succeeded. They'd saved Earth. They'd saved humanity. Status report, Elena ordered, returning to business. Ship is undamaged, James reported. Quantum core is stable. All systems functioning normally. We didn't take a single hit. Casualties? None. 0 injuries, 0 damage. Elena sat back down, letting that sink in. The most lopsided battle in human history. 300 enemy ships destroyed for 0 losses. It should have been impossible. It was impossible. But they'd done it. Anyway, Dr. Webb's voice came through the comm system. Captain Vasquez, I'm reading the battle data from here. What you just did, the quantum mechanics involved, it's going to take us years to understand how you pulled off some of those maneuvers. I just thought about where I wanted the ship to be, Elena said. And it was there. You make it sound simple, Webb said, his voice filled with wonder. What you're describing is conscious observation collapsing quantum superposition in real-time combat conditions. You essentially reshaped reality 300 times in 17 minutes. That shouldn't be possible even with our technology. Maybe humans are better at this than you thought, Elena suggested. Maybe we are, Webb agreed quietly. Admiral, Torres appeared on the main display, her face showing relief and pride in equal measure. Captain Vasquez, congratulations on the most decisive military victory in human history. How does it feel to have just changed everything? Elena thought about that. Changed everything. The Concordat had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years, unchallenged and unchallengeable. Their military supremacy was absolute. Any species that defied them was crushed. The galaxy had accepted this as natural law, as inevitable as gravity. In 17 minutes, humanity had shattered that law. They'd proven that the Concordat could be beaten, that their ships could be destroyed, that their authority could be challenged. The galaxy would never be the same. Permission to return to Neptune Station, Admiral, Elena said. My crew needs rest. Granted, Captain. Bring our people home. The Prometheus shifted back into its quantum superposition state, existing in a million positions at once. Then Elena thought about Neptune Station, and the ship was there, docked as if it had never left. The crew disembarked in silence. They were heroes, but they didn't feel like heroes. They felt like people who'd done something terrible because it was necessary. Some went to the station's chapel to pray, others went to their quarters to sleep. A few went to the observation deck to stare at the stars and process what they'd done. Elena found herself at that same observation window where she'd first seen the Prometheus. The ship was out there now, neither fully real nor unreal, waiting, ready to defend humanity if needed. James joined her at the window. Do you think they'll come back? He asked. Eventually, Elena said. This wasn't their entire fleet, just an enforcement group. When they report what happened, the Concordat will have to respond. They can't let this stand. Can we beat them? Again? Elena thought about that. Maybe, but next time they'll be prepared. They'll study what we did here. They'll develop tactics. They might even find a way to counter quantum weapons. So we didn't win, James said bitterly. We just delayed the inevitable. No, Elena corrected him. We proved something today. We proved that humanity can't be pushed around anymore. We proved that new species can challenge old empires. We proved that technology matters more than tradition. She smiled slightly. And most importantly, we proved that the Concordat can bleed. Across the galaxy, on a dozen worlds, in 100 ships, in 1,000 military command centers, the news spread like wildfire. A human ship, one ship, had destroyed a Concordat enforcement fleet. The impossible had happened. The unthinkable had occurred. Some species saw opportunity. If the Concordat could be beaten, maybe they could win. Their own freedom. Maybe they could challenge the old order. Maybe change was possible. Other species saw danger. If humanity possessed such powerful technology, what else might they develop? What if humans became the new tyrants, the new empire crushing everyone beneath them? The Concordat itself went into emergency session. The Vak, their homeworld, Vakthesh Prime, hosted a gathering of the 7 species' highest military commanders. They reviewed the battle data from the survivors. They analyzed the quantum signatures. They tried to understand what they were facing. It's their consciousness, one scientist explained to the assembled military leaders. Humans perceive reality in a way we don't. They can observe quantum states and collapse them through sheer willpower. With this technology, they can be in multiple places at once, fire from impossible angles, predict our movements before we make them. Can we develop the same technology? Demanded a general from the Quellan hierarchy. In theory, yes, the scientist said. In practice, no. Our species evolved differently. Our minds don't work the right way. We could maybe build the ships, but we couldn't control them. It would be like giving a quantum computer to a species that hasn't invented mathematics yet. Then how do we fight them? The scientist was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. Conventional weapons are useless. They can predict our tactics. They can be anywhere they want to be. Fighting the Prometheus would be like fighting a ghost that can kill you, but can't be killed itself. The Concordate's supreme. Commander, an ancient Quellan named Morthtek listened to all of this with growing concern. He'd lived for 600 years. He'd fought in 40 wars. He'd never lost a campaign. But this was different. This wasn't just a military problem. This was an existential threat. Options, he said simply. We could negotiate, one advisor suggested. Offer them concessions, reduced taxes, more autonomy. Keep them happy enough that they don't attack us. We could isolate them, another advisor said. Quarantine the human systems, cut off their trade, wait for them to collapse economically. Or, Morthtek said slowly, we could accept reality. The galaxy has changed. Humanity now possesses the most powerful military technology we've ever encountered. Fighting them would cost millions of lives and might end in our defeat. Perhaps it's time to consider accommodation. The word hung in the air like a curse. Accommodation, the Concordate accommodating a younger species. It violated every principle they'd built their civilization on. But the alternative was a war they might not win. On Earth, humanity celebrated. They'd won. They'd beaten the bullies. They'd proven their worth. Streets filled with parades. Leaders gave speeches about humanity's bright future. Scientists talked about the new age of space exploration now that the Concordate's restrictions would be lifted. But in the government offices, in the military command centers, the people who understood strategy knew better. This was just the beginning. The Concordate would respond, maybe with negotiation, maybe with war. But they would respond. And humanity would need to be ready. Admiral Torres stood in her office looking at a map of the galaxy. The Concordate controlled 60% of known space. Humanity controlled one small solar system. They'd won a battle, yes. But the war, if it came, would be far more challenging. Her comm panel beeped. Admiral, we're receiving a message from Concordate Space. It's marked as urgent diplomatic communication. Torres took a deep breath. Put it through. A hologram appeared, showing a Quellan in formal diplomatic robes. Admiral Torres, I am Ambassador Krell of the Concordate Diplomatic Corps. My government wishes to open negotiations with humanity regarding our recent misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. Torres almost laughed. They'd killed hundreds of humans, and now it was a misunderstanding. I'm listening, Ambassador, she said carefully. The Concordate recognizes that relations with humanity have been strained. We wish to discuss a new framework for our mutual benefit. Perhaps we were too quick to judge your species. Perhaps there is room for humanity within the galactic community, as equals rather than subjects. Equals. The word humanity had been asking for all along. Now suddenly, the Concordate was willing to offer it. Not because they wanted to, because they had to. I believe that's a conversation worth having, Torres said. I'll forward your message to our government. The transmission ended. Torres sat down, feeling the weight of history on her shoulders. Everything had changed at Neptune. The old order was dying. A new one was being born. And humanity, the young upstart species everyone had dismissed, was now one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. The Prometheus floated in its dock, neither real nor unreal, silent and waiting. The galaxy had learned to fear that ship. Soon, it would learn to respect the species that built it. The Concordate High Council chamber had stood for 5,000 years. Built from materials that would outlast stars, decorated with trophies from 100 conquered worlds, it represented the eternal nature of the 7-species rule. Today, for the first time anyone could remember, that chamber was filled with fear. Supreme Commander Morthtek stood at the center of the circular room, surrounded by holographic displays showing the Neptune battle from every angle. He'd watched the footage 40 times. Each viewing made his situation clearer and more hopeless. "Watch this part again," he said to the assembled military commanders. The hologram zoomed in on the moment when the Prometheus fired its quantum lances. The weapons appeared to originate from 7 different positions simultaneously. One ship, firing from 7 places at once. No wonder Admiral Kratish's fleet hadn't stood a chance. "We sent 300 ships," Morthtek said quietly. 300 of our finest warships. The humans destroyed them in 17 minutes. Not hours, not days, 17 minutes. He looked around the room. "Can any of you explain to me how we fight an enemy that exists everywhere and nowhere at once?" General Vekthar of the Vakthir military stood up. He was old, even for a Vakthir. His scales dulled with age, but his mind still sharp. "Supreme Commander, I've studied the battle data. The human ship doesn't just exist in multiple quantum states. It predicts our movements. When our ships tried to retreat, the humans had already mined their escape routes. They knew where we would go before we went there. Because they observe all possible futures," added Dr. Yennis, the Concordate's chief scientist. "The quantum superposition doesn't just affect the ship's position in space. It affects its position in time. The Prometheus exists in all possible moments simultaneously. When Captain Vasquez observes which future she wants, that future becomes real. She's not predicting our movements. She's choosing the timeline where she's already countered them." The chamber fell silent. What Yennis was describing wasn't just advanced technology. It was something close to godlike power. "Can we develop this technology ourselves?" asked High Chancellor Prindok of the Quellan. Yennis shook her head. "We've tried. We've been researching quantum mechanics for millennia. We can build computers that use quantum states. We can create sensors that detect quantum fluctuations, but we can't create stable quantum superposition in large objects, and we certainly can't control them. The math says it should be possible, but every time we try, the superposition collapses." "Why can the humans do it?" Prindok demanded. "Because of how their consciousness evolved," Yennis explained. "Our species developed on stable worlds with predictable environments. Our minds evolved to see reality as fixed, certain. We observe a thing and we see what it is. Humans evolved in chaos. Ice ages, climate shifts, predators, disease, constant warfare among themselves. Their minds evolved to see possibilities, to imagine multiple futures, to hold contradictory ideas simultaneously. When a human observes quantum superposition, they don't collapse it immediately. They can hold it in that state while they choose which outcome they want." "You're saying their evolutionary disadvantages became advantages?" Vekthar asked. "Exactly," Yennis confirmed. "We thought we were superior because we evolved in stability. But stability makes you rigid. The humans evolved in chaos, and chaos makes you adaptable. Morthtek absorbed all of this. So we can't replicate their technology. We can't fight their ship with conventional weapons. What can we do?" "We could build more ships," suggested one. "Commander. Overwhelm them with numbers. Send 1,000 ships, 10,000. And lose them all," Vekthar said bluntly. "The Prometheus can predict our tactics because it observes all possible battles at once. Sending more ships just means more ships destroyed. There's no tactical solution to this problem." "What about a political solution?" asked Ambassador Krell, who had been listening quietly. All eyes turned to him. "The humans have proven they can destroy us militarily," Krell continued. "But they haven't attacked our homeworlds. They haven't invaded our territory. They destroyed a fleet that came to attack them. That's defensive action, not aggression." "What are you suggesting?" Morthtek asked. "I'm suggesting we give them what they asked for in the first place," Krell said. "Recognition as equals, sovereignty, the right to defend themselves, everything we should have granted them 200 years ago. You want us to reward them for destroying our fleet?" Prindok's voice was outraged. "I want us to survive," Krell replied calmly. "The humans asked for basic rights. We laughed at them. We destroyed their colonies. We threatened their homeworld. We forced them to build the Prometheus. If we'd treated them fairly from the beginning, none of this would have happened." "So this is our fault?" Prindok demanded. "Yes," Krell said simply. This is entirely our fault. We assumed our age gave us wisdom. We assumed our military power gave us the right to dominate others. We were wrong. And now we have two choices. Admit we were wrong and negotiate, or continue down this path and watch the Concordat burn. The chamber erupted into argument. Some supported Krell's position. Others wanted to fight, to show the galaxy that the Concordat couldn't be defeated by upstart species. Still others wanted to find some middle ground, some way to save face while accommodating humanity. Morthtech listened to them all. He'd spent 600 years serving the Concordat, rising through the military ranks to his current position. He'd dedicated his life to preserving the order, the stability, the peace that the 7 species had created. Now that order was crumbling, and he had to decide what came next. Enough, he said quietly, but his voice cut through the argument like a blade. Ambassador Krell will go to Earth. He will offer the humans full membership in the Concordat as equals. We will recognize their sovereignty, remove all restrictions on their technology, and provide reparations for the colonies we destroyed. Supreme. Commander. Prindok started to protest. This is not a discussion, Morthtech interrupted. This is survival. The humans have shown restraint by not attacking us after what we did to them. If we provoke them further, if we give them reason to bring the Prometheus to our worlds, billions will die. I won't let pride destroy everything our ancestors built. He looked around the chamber, meeting each commander's eyes. We ruled the galaxy because we were the strongest. Now we're not. That's reality. We can either accept it and adapt, or we can die clinging to the past. I choose adaptation. The vote was called. It wasn't unanimous, but it didn't need to be. The Concordat would negotiate. On Earth, Sarah Chen couldn't quite believe what she was reading. The message from Ambassador Krell was everything humanity had asked for, everything they'd been denied for 2 centuries. Full sovereignty. No restrictions on military or technological development. Representation in the Concordat as equals. Reparations for Epsilon 7 and other destroyed colonies, and a formal apology for 200 years of oppression. It's too good to be true, she said to Admiral Torres, who was reviewing the same message. There has to be a catch. The catch is they're terrified, Torres replied. They know we could build more ships like the Prometheus. They know we could take our revenge for Epsilon 7. They're trying to make peace before we decide to make war. Should we accept? Sarah asked. Torres was quiet for a moment. That's not a military decision, that's political. But from a strategic perspective, we have everything to gain and nothing to lose. We wanted to be treated as equals. Now they're offering it. The Earth government debated for 3 days. Some wanted to reject the offer, to make the Concordat suffer more. Others wanted to accept immediately, to lock in their victory before the Concordat changed their minds. A few wanted to make additional demands, to push for even more concessions. In the end, pragmatism won. Earth accepted the Concordat's offer with a few modifications. Humanity would join the Concordat as equals, but the organization itself would be reformed. No more rule by the 7 species alone. All member species would have equal representation. Military protection would be guaranteed to all, not just the powerful. And most importantly, any species could leave the Concordat at any time without facing military action. The Concordat agreed to all of it. They had no choice. 1 month after the Battle of Neptune, Ambassador Sarah Chen returned to the Galactic Assembly. The chamber looked the same, but everything had changed. The delegates who had laughed at her before now watched her with cautious respect, some with fear. She stood at the human podium again, but this time she wasn't petitioning. She was announcing. The Concordat of 7 is dead, Sarah said clearly. Today we form something new, the Galactic Coalition, an alliance of equals where every species has a voice, where military power serves all members, where young species are mentored rather than exploited. The Vakthir delegate, not the same one who had mocked her before, that one had been quietly replaced, stood, and nodded. The Vakthir support this reformation. We recognize that our old ways led to injustice. We commit to building something better. One by one, the other members of the old Concordat stood and pledged their support. Some did it reluctantly, but they all did it. The alternative was facing the Prometheus. But it wasn't just the old powers who spoke. Smaller species, ones who had been suppressed for centuries, also stood. A Torvan delegate spoke about finally having hope for the future. A Nessian representative talked about plans to expand their territory now that they weren't restricted by Concordat regulations. A young species that Sarah had never heard of stood and simply said thank you in their translated language. The galaxy was changing, not through slow evolution or gradual reform, but suddenly and dramatically. The Battle of Neptune had shattered the old order like a hammer striking glass. After the assembly, Sarah met privately with Ambassador Krell. The Quellan diplomat had proven surprisingly reasonable throughout the negotiations. "You must understand," Krell said, "not everyone in the Concordat supports this change. There are factions who believe we should have fought, who still believe humanity needs to be put in its place." "Are they a threat?" Sarah asked. "Not militarily," Krell replied. "They saw what happened to Admiral Kratesh's fleet. But politically, yes. They'll work to undermine the coalition. They'll form alliances with species who resent humanity's rise. They'll wait for you to make mistakes." "We'll make mistakes," Sarah said honestly. "We're new to all this, but we'll learn." "I hope so," Krell said. "Because if humanity fails, if you abuse this power you've gained, the galaxy won't forgive you the way we want you to forgive us." It was a fair warning. Humanity had won military supremacy, but they were still one species in a galaxy of hundreds. If they became tyrants, if they let their victory make them cruel, they'd eventually face the same fate as the old Concordat. Sarah returned to Earth and briefed the government on the situation. "We've won," she said, "but now we have to prove we deserve this victory. We need to be better than the Concordat was. Fair, just protective of the weak rather than exploitative." "That's a tall order," the president said. "We're human. We're not perfect." "No," Sarah agreed, "but we're better than we were. Every generation of humanity has been better than the last. We stopped enslaving each other. We stopped constant warfare. We learned to work together. We can learn to lead a galaxy the right way." Meanwhile, on Neptune Station, Captain Elena Vasquez walked through the corridors with Dr. Webb. The old scientist had become a friend over the past month. They'd spent hours discussing quantum mechanics, consciousness, and the strange new weapon humanity had created. "They're calling you a hero," Webb said. "The woman who saved humanity." "I just flew the ship you built," Elena replied. "You did. More than that," Webb insisted. "You understood the quantum nature of the Prometheus better than anyone expected. You made choices in combat that saved Earth. That makes you a hero whether you like it or not." They reached the observation deck. The Prometheus hung in space outside, still in its quantum superposition state. Still there and not there, real and unreal. "What happens now?" Elena asked. "Do we build more?" Webb was quiet for a moment. "We could. We have the technology. We could build a dozen ships like the Prometheus, 100. We could make humanity invincible." "But," Elena prompted. "But that would scare the galaxy," Webb said. "Right now we have one ship. One incredible, terrifying ship that proved we can defend ourselves. If we build an entire fleet of them, we become the new threat. We become what we fought against. So we stay with one ship?" "For now," Webb said. "Maybe forever. The Prometheus isn't just a weapon, it's a symbol. It says we can defend ourselves, but we're not interested in conquering you. One ship is enough to keep us safe. More than that might keep us safe but make everyone else afraid." Elena looked at her ship, her impossible, quantum-locked ship. "It's lonely," she said quietly. "Being the only one, the only ship of its kind, the only crew who can fly it." "Heroes are often lonely," Webb said, "but necessary." 5 years would pass before the Prometheus left Neptune again. 5 years of peace, of building the new galactic coalition, of proving humanity could be trusted with power. But in those 5 years, the galaxy didn't forget about the ship that had broken the Concordate's might. Other species tried to develop similar technology. All failed. The quantum lock remained uniquely human, a quirk of evolution that gave them an edge no one else could duplicate. Some species feared humanity for this. They remembered the Battle of Neptune and worried about what humans might do with their advantage. Others respected humanity, saw them as protectors rather than threats. A few species resented humanity, resented that these newcomers had risen so high so quickly, resented that the old order had fallen, resented that youth and innovation had defeated age and tradition. The galaxy was changing, but change was never simple. Change created winners and losers, hope and fear, friends and enemies. And through it all, the Prometheus waited at Neptune, silent, ready. A quantum ghost that promised protection to humanity and promised destruction to anyone who threatened them. The galaxy had learned its lesson. The question was whether it would remember that lesson when tested again, because there were new threats emerging at the edges of known space. Threats that didn't care about the Concordate, or the Coalition, or the balance of power. Threats that would test whether humanity's quantum-locked Battleship was enough to protect not just Earth but the entire galaxy. That test was coming, sooner than anyone expected. 5 years after the Battle of Neptune, the galaxy had settled into a new normal. The Galactic Coalition replaced the old Concordate, with 47 member species all holding equal representation. Trade flourished as restrictions were lifted. Technology advanced as species shared knowledge freely. Peace, real peace, seemed possible for the first time in millennia. Earth had become an important world in this new order. Not the most important. The Vakthir and Quellan still held significant influence through sheer age and population, but important enough. Human engineers helped build stations across the galaxy. Human diplomats mediated disputes. Human scientists collaborated on research projects that were changing everything from medicine to faster-than-light travel. Ambassador Sarah Chen had become the Coalition's Secretary of Defense, a position created specifically to ensure military power served all species equally. She worked from an office on Coalition Prime, the renamed capital station, and dealt with everything from pirate suppression to border disputes. It was the best job she'd ever had. It was also exhausting. Another request for quantum technology, her assistant said, placing a data pad on her desk. This one is from the Morvani Commonwealth. They're offering to trade their atmospheric processing technology for even basic quantum lock information. Sarah shook her head. Same answer as always. The technology isn't for sale. We don't keep it from others out of selfishness. We keep it from spreading because it's too dangerous in the wrong hands. Her assistant nodded and left. Sarah looked at the requests that piled up every day. Everyone wanted quantum technology. Everyone wanted to build their own version of the Prometheus. They didn't understand that it wouldn't work for them. The quantum lock required human consciousness to function. Other species had tried and failed to replicate it. Dr. Marcus Webb had been right 5 years ago. One ship was enough. More would have made the galaxy afraid. Humanity had shown restraint, and that restraint had earned them respect rather than fear. But respect didn't solve every problem. Sarah's communication panel chimed. Secretary Chen, we have an emergency situation developing in the Outer Rim. The Frontier Council requests immediate assistance. She pulled up the report on her holographic display. What she saw made her blood run cold. 3 star systems had gone silent. Not just communications failure, complete silence. No ships departing, no signals, no signs of life. When scout ships investigated the first system, they found nothing. The planets were still there. The stations were still there. But every living thing was gone. Buildings stood empty. Ships drifted without crews. Millions of beings simply vanished. Get me Admiral Torres, Sarah said immediately. Torres's face appeared on the display. The Admiral looked older now, more gray in her hair, more lines on her face, but her eyes were still sharp. I saw the report, the Devourers. That's what the Frontier Council is calling them, Sarah confirmed. But we don't know what they are. just that they're consuming entire populations and moving toward coalition space. Biological threat? Disease? No signs of disease. No bodies. No violence. People are just gone like they were erased. Sarah pulled up a map showing the 3 dead systems and the predicted trajectory. If they continue on this path, they'll hit Torvan colonies within a month. Major population centers within 3 months. Torres was silent for a moment. You're thinking we need the Prometheus. I'm thinking this is exactly what we built it for, Sarah said. Not to fight other species, but to protect the galaxy from threats no one else can handle. I'll contact Captain Vasquez. But Sarah, the Prometheus hasn't moved from Neptune in 5 years. We don't know if it's still combat ready. We don't know if the crew can still operate it effectively after this long. Then we find out, Sarah said grimly. Because if the Devourers reach core coalition space, millions more will die. At Neptune Station, Captain Elena Vasquez received the orders with mixed feelings. Part of her had hoped the Prometheus would never need to fly again. The ship was a weapon of last resort, and using it meant things had gone very, very wrong. But another part of her had been waiting for this moment. She was a warrior, and warriors weren't meant to sit idle. Crew recall, she ordered. Full activation protocols. I want everyone back on station within 24 hours. Lieutenant Commander James Park, still her first officer after all these years, looked concerned. Captain, we haven't run full operations in 5 years. The crew is scattered across the solar system. Some have families now. It's going to take time to get everyone combat ready. Then we start without full readiness, Elena said. 3 systems are dead, James. Millions of people gone. We don't have time to be perfect. The crew responded quickly. Within 18 hours, 192 of the original 200 crew members were back on Neptune Station. The 8 who couldn't make it had valid reasons: medical issues, family emergencies, 1 retirement. They were replaced with new volunteers who'd been training for this possibility. Dr. Webb met Elena at the airlock to the Prometheus. He looked even older now, but his enthusiasm for the ship hadn't dimmed. We've kept her maintained, Webb said, as they walked toward the docking connection. Monthly system checks, quarterly power-up sequences, but, Captain, I have to be honest. This ship is 5 years older. The quantum core has been stable, but we don't know how it will respond to extended combat operations. Best guess? Elena asked. She'll fly, she'll fight. Whether she'll hold together as well as she did at Neptune? Webb shrugged. That's why we do tests. The Prometheus hadn't changed. It still existed in that strange quantum superposition, still looked like it was trying to be in a million places at once. Elena climbed aboard and felt the ship's consciousness brush against her own. It was like reuniting with an old friend. Hello again, she whispered. The ship responded. Not with words, it couldn't speak, but with a feeling of recognition. It knew her. It had been waiting. The crew took their stations. Engineers in the quantum core monitoring room, weapons officers at the tactical stations, pilots at the navigation consoles, though pilots wasn't quite the right word for people who observed quantum probabilities into reality. All systems online, James reported from the first officer's station. Quantum core is stable at 99%. Weapons charged. Shields in superposition mode. Ship is ready. Elena sat in her command chair and felt the neural interface connect to her mind. Instantly, she was aware of the ship in a way that went beyond sight or sound. She could feel every system, every weapon, every possible position the ship could occupy. It was overwhelming and natural at the same time. Neptune Station, this is Captain Vasquez. Request clearance to depart. Clearance granted, Prometheus, came the response. Good hunting, Captain. Elena closed her eyes and thought about the ship being far from Neptune, about it existing in the space between stars, ready to jump to the outer rim. The Prometheus was there instantly, having never moved at all. Quantum superposition didn't care about distance or time. The ship simply chose to be somewhere else, and reality rearranged itself to make that true. Jump calculations complete, James said. We can reach the Frontier Council Station in 1 jump. Make it so, Elena ordered. The ship jumped, and the universe folded around them. Moments later, or perhaps it was hours, time got strange in quantum space. They emerged near the Frontier Council's main station. The station was a collection of habitats and docking facilities serving the species who lived on the galaxy's edge. These were hardy people, used to dangers that core worlds never faced. If they were calling for help, the situation was dire. A Torvin official appeared on Elena's display. The Torvin were a reptilian species, tough and practical. This one looked scared. Coalition ship Prometheus, thank you for responding. We're tracking the things that destroyed the Vengor, Hess, and Krell systems. They're not ships, not biological. We think they're machines, but unlike any we've seen. Show me, Elena said. The display showed sensor data from a probe that had survived long enough to transmit. What Elena saw didn't make sense at first. The objects, she couldn't call them ships, were geometric shapes that shifted and changed constantly. They moved through space, leaving trails of distorted reality behind them. When they encountered planets, they surrounded them in a sphere of those shifting shapes. And then, over the course of hours, everything living on that planet simply ceased to exist. What are they doing with the populations? Elena asked. We don't know, the Torvin official admitted. There's no sign of the bodies, no mass graves, no remains in space. They're not eating people, they're not enslaving them, they're just removing them from existence. Where are they now? 3 jumps from Torvin Prime. 7 million Torvin live there. We're evacuating, but we can't move 7 million people quickly enough. When those things arrive, millions will die. Elena studied the data. The machines, the devourers, as they were being called, moved methodically, systematically. They weren't raiders or conquerors. They were more like a cleaning crew removing life from the galaxy as if it were an infestation. We'll intercept them before they reach Torvin Prime, Elena said. Stand by. She closed the channel and looked at her crew. They were nervous. The Battle of Neptune had been against an enemy they understood. Ships with crews, tactics they could predict, weapons that followed known rules. These devourers were something else entirely. Captain, one of the sensor operators called out. I'm detecting quantum fluctuations coming from the devourer machines. They're using some kind of reality manipulation technology. Elena felt a chill. Like the Prometheus? Similar but different, the operator said. We manipulate quantum states through observation. They seem to be forcing reality to change through brute calculation. It's like the difference between choosing which path to take and bulldozing all the paths you don't want. Can we fight them? Unknown, Captain. Their technology might be able to counter our quantum lock. There was only one way to find out. Plot a course to intercept the devourers before they reach Torvin Prime, Elena ordered. All hands to battle stations. This is what we trained for. Let's show these machines that life doesn't give up easily. The Prometheus shifted through quantum, space appearing in the path of the devourer fleet. Fleet wasn't the right word, it was more like a swarm. Hundreds of the geometric shapes moved through space in a pattern that looked random, but probably wasn't. Elena opened a communication channel, broadcasting on all frequencies. Unknown vessels, this is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Galactic Coalition ship Prometheus. You have destroyed 3 inhabited systems and killed millions of beings. Turn back now or be destroyed. There was no response. The devourers continued, their approach unaffected by her warning. So much for diplomacy, James muttered. Weapons free, Elena ordered. Target the lead elements. Fire. The Prometheus's quantum lances fired, the beams appearing from multiple angles as the ship existed in several positions at once. The lances struck 3 devourer machines. The machines flickered, distorted, and then reconstructed themselves. Undamaged. What? Elena stared at the tactical display. They adapted to quantum weapons? Not adapted, her science officer said. They're calculating probable attack vectors and repositioning themselves through their own reality manipulation. Captain, they're not dodging our fire. They're retroactively making it so we never hit them. Elena understood immediately. The Prometheus changed reality through observation. The Devourers changed reality through computation. It was two different approaches to the same impossible goal. If we can't hurt them, we need to outsmart them, Elena said. They're calculating probabilities and choosing outcomes. But they're machines. They calculate based on available data. If we can make our actions unpredictable, random, they won't be able to counter us. How do we make quantum weapons random? James asked. Elena smiled. We don't. We make our observations random. Fire a spread of torpedoes in quantum superposition. I won't observe which paths they take until after the Devourers have calculated their defense. It was risky. She'd be firing blind, essentially. But it might work. Quantum torpedoes ready, the weapons officer reported. Fire spread pattern alpha. All torpedoes remain in superposition. I'll collapse the wave function on my mark. The torpedoes launched, existing in 1,000 possible trajectories at once. The Devourers calculated defensive positions based on probable paths. Then, at the last possible moment, Elena observed the torpedoes into the paths the Devourers hadn't. Defended explosions blossomed across the Devourer formation. A dozen machines were destroyed, their geometric shapes breaking apart into fragments that dissolved into nothing. It worked, James cheered, but the celebration was short-lived. The remaining Devourers adapted. They stopped trying to predict and started covering all possible positions simultaneously, creating defensive fields that existed in superposition, just like the Prometheus's weapons. They're learning, Elena said. We showed them our trick and now they're using it against us. The battle continued for hours. The Prometheus would find a new tactic, destroy a few Devourers, and then they would adapt. It was like fighting an enemy that evolved in real time, that learned from every mistake and never made the same error twice. Elena's crew was exhausted. Maintaining quantum observation during combat required intense mental focus. Some crew members had to be rotated out as they reached their cognitive limits. Captain, we can't keep this up, James said. We've destroyed maybe 50 of them, but there are hundreds left. And they're still advancing toward Torvin Prime. Elena looked at the tactical display. He was right. They were losing. Not quickly, but steadily. The Devourers were winning through attrition. There has to be a way, she said. They're machines. Machines have limits. So do humans, James pointed out gently. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the quantum superposition of the ship around her. All those possibilities, all those potential realities. The Prometheus could be anywhere, do anything, as long as she observed it into being. And then she understood. The Devourers manipulate reality through calculation, she said slowly. They compute all possible outcomes and choose the one they want. But computation takes time, even for super-advanced machines. And the more variables you introduce, the longer the calculation takes. What are you thinking, Captain? I'm thinking we give them too many variables to calculate. We put the Prometheus into maximum superposition. Not just the ship's position, but every system, every weapon, every particle of the hull. We become so probabilistic that their computers can't process all the possibilities before we attack. James looked worried. Captain, we've never put the ship into maximum superposition. The strain on the quantum core could be catastrophic, and the crew would have to maintain observation of millions of probability states simultaneously. It might break our minds. It might, Elena agreed. But it's the only way to win. The Devourers are protecting life by killing it, removing the messy chaos of organic beings from their perfectly ordered galaxy. We need to show them that chaos is stronger than order. That life's unpredictability is a feature, not a bug. She looked around at her crew. They were tired, scared, but still determined. I won't order this, it's too dangerous, but I'm asking for volunteers. Anyone who wants to push the Prometheus to its absolute limit, stay at your station. Anyone who doesn't, no judgment, take a shuttle and evacuate. No one moved. No one left their station. Well then, Elena said, smiling despite the fear in her heart. Let's teach these machines what humans do when we're backed into a corner. Maximum quantum superposition. All systems. On my mark. She closed her eyes and reached out with her consciousness touching every part of the ship. She felt 200 minds join with hers, all observing, all maintaining the quantum state. Together, they pushed the Prometheus beyond its design limits, beyond what Dr. Webb thought was possible. The ship exploded into infinite possibilities. It was everywhere and nowhere. It was real and unreal. It existed in every possible state simultaneously. A quantum ghost that couldn't be predicted, calculated, or countered. The Devourers tried. Their computers worked at speeds faster than thought, calculating trillions of scenarios per second. But the Prometheus had become pure probability, pure potential. For every calculation the Devourers made, the ship's state shifted into something different. Elena struck. Not with one attack, but with 1,000,000 attacks from 1,000,000 positions. Quantum torpedoes appeared inside Devourer hulls. Energy beams fired from angles that didn't exist. Kinetic projectiles materialized at relativistic speeds. The Devourers fell like dominoes. Their reality manipulation couldn't counter attacks that came from every probability at once. Their calculations couldn't keep up with human consciousness choosing outcomes faster than machines could process. In 17 minutes, the same amount of time it had taken to destroy the Concordat fleet 5 years ago, the Devourers were gone. Every machine destroyed, every geometric shape reduced to expanding clouds of exotic particles. Elena opened her eyes and immediately collapsed. Around her, her crew was slumping at their stations, utterly exhausted. They'd pushed their minds, beyond human limits, had held the impossible in their thoughts for 17 minutes, but they'd won. "Status," Elena croaked. "All Devourers destroyed," James reported, his voice weak. "Torvin Prime is safe. The galaxy is safe." Elena smiled and then passed out. She woke up 3 days later in Neptune Station's medical bay. Dr. Webb was there looking at her with a mixture of pride and concern. "You did it," he said. "You pushed the Prometheus beyond anything we thought possible. And you somehow didn't destroy the ship, the solar system, or all of reality in the process." "I had help," Elena said. 200 of the bravest people I've ever known. They're all recovering. Some will have headaches for weeks. A few might never be quite the same mentally. Holding that much quantum superposition leaves marks on the mind. But they're alive. You're alive. And you saved 7 million Torvin and stopped the Devourers before they could consume more systems. Elena sat up slowly. "Are there more Devourers out there?" "We don't know," Webb admitted. "The ones you destroyed came from beyond the galactic rim. There might be more. There might be worse things. But now the galaxy knows that humanity's quantum-locked battleship isn't just for defense. It's for protecting everyone." Word of the battle spread across the galaxy even faster than news of Neptune had. The species who feared humanity felt their fear justified. The Prometheus was even more powerful than they'd thought. The species who respected humanity felt their respect deepen into something like awe. But most species simply felt relief. Relief that when an unknowable threat emerged, when machines tried to erase life from the galaxy, humanity had stood up and said no. Not just for themselves, but for everyone. The Galactic Coalition held an emergency session. Representatives from 47 species gathered to discuss the implications of the Devourer attack and humanity's response. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood before them, feeling echoes of that first assembly 5 years ago. But this time, no one was laughing. No one was dismissing humanity. They were listening with respect, with gratitude, with the recognition that the young species had grown into something essential. "The Devourers proved something important," Sarah said. "No single species can protect the galaxy alone. Not the Vakthir with their ancient military traditions. Not the Quellan with their diplomatic networks. Not even humanity with our quantum-locked battleship. We need each other. We need cooperation, not domination, unity, not empire." She paused, letting her words sink in. "The Prometheus will remain at Neptune, ready to defend the galaxy when needed. But it's not a sword hanging over anyone's head. It's a shield protecting all of us from threats we can't face alone. That's what humanity offers to the Coalition. That's what we've proven we can do." The Vakthir representative, the same General Vekthar who had been present when the old Concordat fell, stood and spoke. 5 years ago, humanity shattered our pride. They showed us that age doesn't guarantee wisdom, that power doesn't justify oppression. Today, they've shown us something else. That the strong can protect the weak. That new species can lead by example rather than force. He bowed his head, a gesture of deep respect among his people. The Vakthir stand with humanity, and we commit to being better than we were. One by one, other species stood and echoed his words. The Quellan, the Torvin, the Zith, species old and young, powerful and weak, all acknowledging that the galaxy had changed and changed for the better. When the session ended, Sarah returned to Earth for the first time in months. She stood in her apartment in New York, looking out at the city lights, thinking about how far humanity had come. They'd gone from being dismissed as useful primitives to being one of the galaxy's most respected species. They'd built a weapon that could destroy entire fleets, then shown the wisdom to use it only when necessary. They'd fought for their freedom and then worked to free others. It wasn't perfect. There were still species who resented humanity, still factions that wanted to return to the old ways, still threats emerging from the unknown reaches of space. But humanity had proven something important. They'd proven that you didn't need to be ancient to be wise, that you didn't need to be numerous to be powerful, that compassion and strength could exist in the same species. On Neptune, the Prometheus returned to its dock and settled back into its quantum superposition. Captain Elena Vasquez and her crew dispersed to their lives, knowing they'd be called again when needed. Dr. Marcus Webb walked through the observation deck, looking at his impossible creation. Other scientists had begged him to build more ships, to create a fleet of quantum-locked battleships. He'd refused every time. One is enough, he said to the empty room. One ship to protect billions. One symbol to remind the galaxy that innovation matters more than tradition. One proof that humanity deserves its place among the stars. The ship flickered in its quantum states, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. It simply was, waiting for the next time it was needed, ready to defend not just humanity but all the countless species who looked to the stars and hoped for a better future. And in the galactic databases, historians were already recording the events of these years. The Great Humbling, they called it. When an ancient order fell and a new one rose. When humanity taught the galaxy that the future belonged to those brave enough to reach for it. The Prometheus had silenced the galaxy twice now. Once by breaking the Concordate's pride, once by destroying machines that would erase all life. The galaxy had learned its lesson. It had learned to respect humanity, to value innovation over age, to embrace change rather than fear it. But most importantly, it had learned that one quantum-locked human battleship, crewed by 200 determined people, was enough to protect trillions. Because humanity had built the Prometheus not to conquer, but to defend. Not to dominate, but to protect. Not to rule, but to serve. And that made all the difference. The watch eternal continued. The Prometheus waited at Neptune, silent and patient, ready for the next threat, the next impossible challenge, the next moment when the galaxy would need reminding that life, in all its chaotic beauty, was worth defending. They had feared humanity because humanity built one ship, but they should have feared humanity because humanity only needed one, and that truth would echo across the galaxy for generations to come.